They tried to sell her off like she was nothing more than a burden, her fate hanging on the highest bid. But when he stepped forward and said, "She belongs with me," it left everyone wondering, was this just defiance? Or the beginning of a love strong enough to rewrite her story? In the dusty town square of Millfield is buzzing with activity that makes your stomach turn. What should be a normal market day has become something far more sinister, a human auction disguised as a bride bidding. At the center of it all stands Rose Mitchell, 22 years old, with fire in her green eyes despite the tears threatening to spill over. Her own family, her father, her brothers, even her cold-hearted stepmother have dragged her here like she's livestock to be sold to the highest bidder. "Come on now, gentlemen." Her father Samuel bellows to the growing crowd of rough men. "My stepdaughter's got good breeding, can cook, clean, and she's got all her teeth. What am I bid for a fine wife?" The crowd erupts in cruel laughter and jeers. Men shout out numbers like they're bidding on cattle, while others make comments that would make a sailor blush. Rose stands there, her chin held high despite the humiliation burning through her veins, her hands clenched so tight, her knuckles are white. $50, shouts a grizzled rancher with tobacco-stained teeth. 75, counters a merchant whose reputation with women is darker than his coffee. Rose's stepmother Martha counts the money eagerly, while her stepbrothers snicker and place bets on who'll win their burden. That's what they've always called her, a burden. An extra mouth to feed, dead weight since her mother passed 5 years ago. But there's someone else in that crowd, standing in the shadows at the edge of the square. Jake Sullivan, 30 years old, weathered hands and honest eyes, has been watching this whole spectacle with growing rage. He'd ridden into town for supplies, not expecting to witness the most shameful display of human cruelty he's ever seen. Something about the way Rose holds herself proud, despite being broken, defiant, despite being defeated, strikes him like lightning. This isn't just wrong, it's evil. And Jake Sullivan has never been one to stand by and watch evil happen when he could do something about it. His jaw clenches as another man bids $100, describing exactly what he plans to do with his purchase. Rose flinches, but doesn't break, and that's when Jake knows he can't walk away. The bidding reaches a fever pitch, and Rose closes her eyes, preparing for whatever fate awaits her. But she doesn't know that her salvation is about to come from the most unexpected place. What would you do if you saw someone's family treating them like property? Let me know in the comments below, because what happens next will shock you. The bidding has reached $125 when Marcus Webb, the town's most notorious drunk and wife-beater, raises his hand with a cruel grin. $150. He shouts, his eyes crawling over Rose like she's already his property. "And I promise you boys, I'll break her in real good." The crowd erupts in laughter that makes Rose's skin crawl. Her father nods approvingly. Webb's money is as good as anyone's, and Samuel Mitchell stopped caring about his stepdaughter's welfare the day her mother died. Martha is practically salivating at the prospect of that much cash, already counting how they'll spend it. "Going once?" Samuel calls out, his voice booming across the square. $150 to Mr. Webb? Going twice?" Rose's heart pounds like a war drum. She's heard the stories about Webb's previous wives, how the first one fell down the stairs so many times she stopped coming to town, how the second one disappeared entirely one winter night. Now she's about to become the third, and there's nothing she can do to stop it. "Sold to $200. The voice cuts through the noise like a blade, through silk, quiet, steady, but carrying enough authority to silence the entire crowd. Every head turns toward the voice, including Rose's, and that's when she sees him for the first time. Jake Sullivan steps out of the shadows, his spurs chiming softly against the wooden platform as he approaches. He's tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that comes from a man who's never backed down from doing what's right. His hat is tilted low, but Rose can see his eyes clear, determined, and burning with something that makes her heart skip. I said $200, Jake repeats, his gaze never leaving Rose's face. The crowd murmurs in confusion. This isn't how these things usually go. Most men bid because they want a servant or worse. But Jake's looking at Rose like she's a person, not property. Marcus Webb snarls and steps forward, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. You can't just come in here and... I can and I am, Jake says calmly, finally turning those steel-gray eyes on Webb. There's something in his expression that makes the drunk think twice about reaching for his weapon. 200, cash money. Right here, right now. Samuel's eyes light up like Christmas morning. $200 is more than he makes in 3 months of farming. Well now, that's mighty generous, stranger. You got yourself a deal. But Jake holds up a hand before any money changes ownership. He steps closer to Rose, close enough that she can smell the leather and sage scent of him, close enough to see the sincerity in his eyes when he speaks. Miss, he says quietly, his voice meant only for her. I'm not buying you like some piece of livestock. I'm offering you a choice. You can come with me, and I'll treat you with the respect and kindness you deserve. Or, you can walk away right now, and I'll make sure you have enough money to start over somewhere safe. The crowd falls silent, straining to hear this unexpected conversation. Rose stares at this stranger who's just turned her world upside down, her mind reeling with possibilities she never dared imagine. Rose's stepfamily explodes like a kicked hornet's nest the moment they realize what Jake is offering: freedom instead of ownership, choice instead of purchase. Now wait just a damn minute, Samuel roars, his face turning purple with rage. You can't just give her choices. She's family property, and I'm her guardian. The deal is she goes with whoever pays, no questions asked. Martha screeches her agreement, jabbing a bony finger at Jake like she's casting a curse. You got no right interfering with family business, stranger. That girl owes us 5 years of food and shelter since her mama died. She's gonna work that debt off one way or another. Rose's stepbrothers, Tom and Billy, lumber forward like the bullies they've always been. They're used to intimidating their stepsister, and they figure this cowboy can't be much different. You heard our pa, Tom growls, cracking his knuckles. Pay up and take your property, or get out of our town. But Jake doesn't flinch. If anything, he seems to grow taller, his presence expanding until it fills the entire square. This is a man who's faced down rustlers, outlaws, and wild animals. A couple of small-town bullies don't even register as a threat. Your property? Jake's voice drops to a dangerous whisper that makes smart men take a step back. That's where you're wrong, friend. She's not property at all. She's a human being with the right to choose her own path. The crowd shifts nervously. This isn't going according to script. Usually, these auctions end with money changing hands, and everyone going home, satisfied, everyone except the woman being sold, of course. But Jake's turning their twisted tradition on its head. Marcus Webb, still drunk and angry about losing his prize, decides to push his luck. Listen here, cowboy. We got ways of doing things in this town, and you ain't gonna waltz in here and... He doesn't get to finish the sentence. Jake's hand shoots out faster than a striking snake, grabbing Webb by the throat and lifting him onto his tiptoes. The drunk's eyes bulge with shock and terror. The lady and I are having a conversation, Jake says conversationally, as if he's not currently choking a man in front of half the town. I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your mouth shut until we're finished. He releases Webb, who stumbles backward, gasping and clutching his throat. The message is clear to everyone watching. This stranger isn't someone to trifle with. Rose watches this display of protection with wonder and growing hope. No one has ever stood up for her before. Her own family has spent years telling her she's worthless, a burden, lucky that anyone would want her at all. But here's this man, this stranger, treating her like she matters. The fear in her chest begins to transform into something else. Gratitude, yes, but also a trembling disbelief that maybe, just maybe, Her nightmare is about to end. The choice is yours, miss, Jake says, turning back to Rose with gentle eyes that contrast sharply with the steel he just showed her stepfamily. What's it going to be? Samuel makes one last desperate grab for control. Rose, you get yourself over here right now. You belong to this family, and we decide what's best for you. For the first time in 5 years, Rose Mitchell looks her stepfather dead in the eye and says the word that changes everything. Number. The single word hangs in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Rose has never said no to her stepfamily before, never dared to, never been allowed to. But standing there in that dusty square with Jake's steady presence beside her, she feels something she'd forgotten existed. Courage. My name is Rose, she says, her voice growing stronger with each word. Rose Mitchell, and I choose to go with this gentleman. Jake tips his hat respectfully. Jake Sullivan, ma'am, and I give you my word, you'll be treated with nothing but respect and kindness for as long as you'll have me. Samuel lunges forward, his face twisted with greed and rage. You can't do this! She's family! She owes us! But Jake steps smoothly between them, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. The lady has made her choice. I suggest you respect it. His voice is calm, but there's iron underneath that makes Samuel think twice about pushing further. The crowd watches in stunned silence as Jake offers Rose his arm like she's a lady at a church social, not a woman who was just being auctioned off like livestock. She takes it with trembling fingers, hardly believing this is real. Jake's horse is a beautiful chestnut mare named Liberty, a name that seems fitting given the circumstances. He helps Rose up with gentle hands, then swings into the saddle behind her. The warmth of his presence at her back feels like safety for the first time in years. As they ride out of Millfield, Rose can hear her stepfamily still shouting behind them, demanding justice, threatening revenge. But their voices fade with each hoofbeat, becoming nothing more than ugly echoes of a life she's finally leaving behind. You don't know anything about me, Rose says after they've ridden in comfortable silence for a while. I could be terrible, I could be lazy or mean or damaged. Jake's quiet chuckle rumbles through his chest. Could be, but I doubt it. Takes a special kind of strength to stand up like you did back there. Most folks would have just accepted their fate. Why did you do it? She asks, the question that's been burning in her mind since he first spoke up. You could have just ridden away, pretended you didn't see anything. Jake is quiet for so long that Rose thinks he won't answer. Then, in a voice rough with old pain, he says, Lost my sister 10 years ago. Similar situation, family, that saw her as a burden instead of a blessing. I was young, scared, didn't know how to help her. By the time I figured out what was happening, it was too late. Rose feels his pain like a physical ache. What happened to her? Married off to a man who worked her to death before she turned 25. Never got to see her smile again after that wedding day. His arms tightened slightly around her, protective but not possessive. When I saw you standing there today, looking like the whole world had abandoned you, well, I couldn't let history repeat itself. Not when I finally had the power to do something about it. The late afternoon sun paints the prairie in shades of gold and amber as they ride toward whatever future awaits them. For the first time in years, Rose feels something blooming in her chest that she'd thought was dead forever. Hope. Jake's ranch appears on the horizon like something out of a dream. A modest but well-maintained homestead with a sturdy cabin, a barn that's seen better days but still stands strong, and pastures where horses graze peacefully in the fading light. It's nothing fancy, but it's honest work made manifest. And after years of living with people who resented her very existence, it looks like paradise to Rose. It's not much, Jake says as he helps her down from Liberty, his hands steady and respectful. But it's mine, built with my own 2 hands. Every board, every nail, every fence post represents honest sweat. Rose looks around with wonder, taking in the vegetable garden, The chicken coop. The way everything has a purpose and a place. It's beautiful, she says, and means it. It feels like home. Jake shows her to the cabin's spare room, clean, comfortable, with a real window that looks out over the prairie. There's a quilt on the bed that looks handmade, and fresh wildflowers in a mason jar on the nightstand. This is yours for as long as you want it, he says, standing awkwardly in the doorway, like he's afraid of overstepping some invisible boundary. The door has a lock, and you're the only one with the key. You come and go as you please, eat what you want, do what you want. This isn't a prison, Rose. It's sanctuary. She stares at him, waiting for the catch, for the list of expectations and demands that always followed any kindness in her stepfamily's house. But Jake just tips his hat and turns to leave. Wait, she calls out, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? There has to be something. Nobody does this kind of thing for free. Jake pauses in the doorway, his shoulders sagging slightly. When he turns back, his eyes are filled with a sadness that makes Rose's heart ache. I want you to remember what it feels like to be treated like a human being, he says simply. I want you to have choices again. I want you to smile because you want to, not because someone's forcing you to. And if you decide you want to leave tomorrow, or next week, or next year, I'll give you enough money to start fresh somewhere else. No questions asked. Rose sinks onto the bed, overwhelmed by kindness she doesn't know how to process. I don't understand. Men don't. They don't just help women without expecting something in return. Then you've been around the wrong men, Jake says gently. You don't owe me anything, Rose. Not gratitude, not labor, not anything else. You're free to figure out who you want to be when nobody's telling you what you're worth. That night, Rose lies in the softest bed she's had in years, listening to the sound of Jake moving around the cabin. She strains to hear footsteps approaching her door, the rattle of a doorknob being tested, any sign that his kindness was just an act. But all she hears is the normal sounds of a man preparing for sleep boots being pulled off, dishes being washed, the creak of his own bed as he settles in for the night. For the first time in 5 years, Rose falls asleep without fear, the key to her door clutched safely in her hand, and the promise of choice echoing in her dreams like a lullaby. Word travels fast in small frontier communities, and by the end of the week, the story of Rose's rescue has spread through 3 counties like wildfire. Jake's simple trip to town for supplies becomes an education in how quickly people can twist a good deed into something scandalous. Afternoon, Jake, calls out Mrs. Henderson from the general store, her voice dripping with false sweetness. How's that girl you acquired? Settling in? I do hope you're taking proper care of her. The emphasis on proper makes Jake's jaw clench, but he keeps his voice level. Miss Mitchell is doing well, thank you for asking. She's a fine woman who deserves respect. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shoot up at the word respect, and Jake realizes he's just given the gossips more ammunition. By evening, half the town will be whispering about how the Sullivan Ranch has become a den of sin and impropriety. The accusations get bolder as the week progresses. Men who bid on Rose at the auction now claim they were just helping out, and that Jake stole her from more suitable arrangements. Marcus Webb, still nursing his bruised throat and wounded pride, tells anyone who'll listen that Jake is probably keeping Rose as his personal slave. Ain't natural. A man and woman living together without being married. Webb slurs into his whiskey at the saloon. Mark my words, that Sullivan fellow's got plans for that girl, and they ain't Christian plans neither. The criticism reaches a boiling point when Reverend Phillips shows up at the ranch on Sunday afternoon, his face set in lines of righteous disapproval. Behind him rides a small delegation of concerned citizens, including Samuel Mitchell and his sons. Mr. Sullivan, the Reverend begins before his horse has even stopped moving. We've come to discuss the irregular situation you've created with Miss Mitchell. The community has concerns about propriety and moral standards. Jake steps out onto his porch, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. Behind him, Rose appears in the doorway, her face pale but determined. She's been dreading this moment all week, knowing her stepfamily wouldn't give up their meal ticket without a fight. "What kind of concerns?" Jake asks mildly, though his eyes have gone cold as winter steel. Samuel pushes his horse forward, emboldened by the presence of the preacher. That girl belongs with family, not living in sin with some stranger. We're prepared to take her back. Forget this whole mess ever happened. For a price, of course, Jake says dryly. How much is your family's forgiveness worth, Mitchell? Samuel's face turns red, but before he can sputter a response, Rose steps out onto the porch beside Jake. The symbolism isn't lost on anyone. She's choosing her place, standing with the man who offered her freedom instead of the family that tried to sell her. "I'm not going anywhere," she says, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Mr. Sullivan has treated me with more kindness in 1 week than you showed me in 5 years. If there's sin here, it was in that auction square, not in this house." The delegation shifts uncomfortably. They'd expected to find a cowering victim, not a woman who speaks for herself with confidence and conviction. Besides, Jake adds with a slight smile, if the community is so concerned about propriety, perhaps they should consider why they allowed a human auction to take place in their town square. It's a masterful blow that leaves the righteous delegation speechless. Reverend Phillips clears his throat uncomfortably. Samuel's face turns purple with rage, and one by one, the concerned citizens find excuses to leave. As they ride away in defeat, Jake and Rose watch from the porch, knowing this won't be the last challenge they face, but confident they can face it together. Winter melts into spring, and with it comes a transformation neither Jake nor Rose expected. Spring arrives at the Sullivan Ranch with a warmth that seems to breathe new life into everything it touches, including Rose. 3 months of freedom, respect, and genuine kindness have transformed her from the broken woman who stood on that auction block into someone Jake barely recognizes. She hums while tending the vegetable garden they planted together, her voice sweet and clear as mountain water. She laughs at Jake's terrible jokes over dinner, the sound like music he'd forgotten existed. Most importantly, she's begun to speak her mind, sharing opinions and dreams she'd kept locked away for years. "I used to want to teach children," she admits one evening as they sit on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. "Before Mama died, before everything changed, I loved reading, and I thought maybe I could help other kids love it too." Jake looks at her profile in the fading light, noting the way her eyes shine when she talks about her dreams. "What's stopping you now? There's kids in town who need schooling, and you're smart enough to teach them." Rose turns to stare at him in amazement. "You really think I could do that? Even after everything?" "I think you could do anything you set your mind to," Jake says simply, and the conviction in his voice makes Rose's heart flutter in a way that has nothing to do with fear. Their relationship has been building slowly, carefully, like a wildflower garden that needs time to bloom properly. Jake has never pushed, never demanded, never assumed. Instead, he's shown Rose through daily actions what it means to be valued, protected, and cherished. He brings her coffee every morning before dawn, the way she likes it, with just a touch of honey. He listens when she talks about her mother, about the dreams she'd buried, about the fears that still wake her sometimes in the middle of the night. He teaches her to ride his gentlest horse and to shoot his spare rifle, always emphasizing that she should never depend on anyone else for her safety. "Independence is the greatest gift I can give you," he tells her during one of their evening conversations. "I want you to stay because you choose to, not because you have nowhere else to go." But Rose is beginning to realize that her reasons for staying have evolved far beyond gratitude or convenience. She's falling in love with this man who saw her worth when no one else did, who fought for her freedom without expecting anything in return, who treats her like a partner instead of a possession. The moment of truth comes during a spring thunderstorm that shakes the cabin and sends Rose seeking comfort in the main room where Jake is reading by lamplight. He looks up when she appears, takes in her rain-dampened nightgown and frightened eyes, and simply opens his arms. "Bad dream?" he asks gently as she settles beside him on the sofa, careful not to touch unless she initiates contact. "Not a dream," Rose whispers, then takes the biggest leap of faith in her life by leaning into his warmth. "I was thinking about what you said, about staying because I choose to." Jake's arms close around her carefully, like she's made of spun glass. "And what did you decide?" Rose looks up into his eyes, those honest, steady eyes that first gave her hope, and speaks the truth that's been growing in her heart for weeks. "I choose you, Jake Sullivan. Not because I have to, not because I owe you, but because I love you. I love the man you are, the life we've built, the future I can see when I look at you." The kiss that follows is gentle, reverent, and full of promises neither of them had dared to hope for just a few months ago. The wedding takes place 6 months later, in the same town square where Rose was once auctioned off like cattle, a deliberate choice that transforms a place of shame into one of triumph. Word has spread far and wide about the unusual courtship, drawing visitors from neighboring towns who want to witness something genuinely beautiful for a change. Rose wears a dress she sewed herself from fabric Jake bought in the city cream-colored silk with tiny pearl buttons and lace trim that makes her feel like a princess. More importantly, she wears a smile that comes from deep inside, the kind that can't be faked or forced. Jake stands at the makeshift altar in his best suit, his hair freshly cut and his boots polished to a shine. But it's the look in his eyes when he sees Rose walking toward him that takes everyone's breath away. This is a man looking at his miracle, his second chance, his heart walking toward him in human form. The ceremony is interrupted twice by Rose's stepfamily, who've shown up uninvited and unrepentant. Samuel makes one last desperate attempt to claim ownership over his stepdaughter, shouting about legal rights and family obligations, until Sheriff Davidson firmly escorts him to the edge of town with a warning not to return. "She was never yours to sell," the sheriff tells Samuel, quietly but firmly. "And she sure as hell isn't yours to reclaim, now that she's found happiness." But the most powerful moment comes when Reverend Phillips asks if anyone objects to the union. Marcus Webb, drunk as usual, starts to stand up with some slurred protest about impropriety and sin. Before he can get a word out, Rose herself turns around to face him. "Mr. Webb," she says clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the square, "I was never for sale. Not then, not now, not ever. I'm here today because I choose to be, marrying a man who sees me as a partner, not property. If you have a problem with that, I suggest you examine your own heart and ask why the idea of a woman having choices threatens you so much." The crowd erupts in applause, and Webb slinks away like the coward he's always been. When Jake and Rose are finally pronounced husband and wife, their kiss is witnessed by half the county and celebrated with cheers that echo across the prairie. But for them, the real celebration comes later, in the quiet of their cabin, where Jake has prepared a surprise. "I have something for you," he says, producing a small wrapped package. Inside is a deed, legal papers making Rose a full partner in the ranch, with her name right beside his on the ownership documents. "You already gave me everything," Rose says, tears streaming down her face as she reads the papers that make their partnership official in every way possible. "No," Jake says, pulling her close as the prairie wind whispers through their windows. "You gave me everything. You gave me a reason to believe in love again, a purpose beyond just existing, a future worth building. You're not my wife because I bought you or because you owed me. You're my wife because we chose each other every single day." As they stand together in their home, their real home, built on choice and love and mutual respect, Rose thinks about the girl who stood on that auction block so many months ago. That girl couldn't have imagined this happiness was possible. But sometimes, the most beautiful things in life come from the most unlikely places. Sometimes, love finds you in the very spot where you thought you'd lost everything. And sometimes, the best partnerships are formed not by bargains or transactions, but by two people who look at each other and say, "You belong with me." If you thought this story was incredible, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.